All right, progressive reform in the cities and states. The goal is to make government more reflective of the people's will. That's a progressive goal with things like direct primaries, with things like direct election of senators. And they want to use government to fix problems. At this time, we're going to see federal power increase as well as the power of government increase at other levels. And we're also going to see more use of experts through commissions and agencies doing the work in government that maybe might have been done by unqualified individuals in the past. One of the problems that progressives are trying to address is that the political parties by 1900 have too much power. The party itself has too much power, and the individual voter's power has been drastically reduced. If we look at voter turnout, we can really see this lack of power. We can see the voting turnout really dropping from the 1876 election down to the 1920s to the 1930s, where we're only around 50% voters actually voting. And this is even lower in places like the South, where African Americans aren't bothering to vote at all and are really being disenfranchised. And the reason for that drop in voting has to do with the rise of interest groups. This is just one of the reasons. We have interest groups that reflect professional societies, interest groups that reflect the interests of labor organizations and farm lobbies. These are groups that pressure government for policy change. In other words, you don't need a party anymore. You don't need to get somebody elected who's going to be friendly to your union. Your union, through a interest group, can put pressure on whoever gets elected to do what your union would like. Social workers and women's clubs and reform groups are going to use the same methods to pressure government to do what they want. Let's look at reform in the cities first. A major goal of the progressives is going to be improve government with better civil servants. If we can hire better people to work in government, government will be better. So we need civil servants, people who work for government, to be better trained. We first see this in the 1880s with that civil service reform, that idea of get the spoilsmen out, end the spoils system that had been in place since Jackson, and get good bureaucrats into those offices, people that are qualified. And this is going to be a real progressive goal. Progressives like efficiency. Progressives like results. Progressives want to see corporations regulated. They want to see taxes be more fair. They want to see elections cleaned up. And all of that is going to take better civil servants. The Pendleton Act was the first step towards this way back in 1883, but it's going to continue at all levels of government. And this is going to be, we're going to start to see government modeled more after businesses, where elected officials oversee teams of experts. So you might elect a mayor, but that mayor is going to employ not his buddies, but people who are experts in their field. This is similar to the way corporations are run. Shareholders elect a board of directors, and then the directors appoint officers to run things. At the local level, we see this first in 1900 in Galveston, Texas, where they had a major hurricane and really had a lot of work to do in Galveston. And so what they did was they divided up the government into commissions. And the commissioners were elected, and each commission oversaw a specific area. One commissioner might be in charge of taxes, another might be in charge of utilities, another might be in charge of fire and police. And then those commissioners are going to appoint experts to run each area. Hire a police chief, hire a fire chief, hire an accountant to help with taxes. And then the commission has the legislative and executive power in their area. We see this a little bit at our county government here in Delaware. Our county government has 3 commissioners, each in charge of some certain areas for the county government. In the city of Delaware, along with many other cities, Delaware uses a council manager government. And this is where the city council is elected, and then the city council chooses a professional manager, a city manager. The manager is hired by the city council. He is their employee, and his job is to oversee all the different department heads underneath him: police, fire, accounting, finance, whatever. The city council holds the legislative power, and they give the manager the executive power. Cities started to use this to take power away from the political machines that were so corrupt by the end of the 1800s. Cities are going to also start to hire more and more experts to run the regulatory commissions and departments that they create. They're going to hire engineers to run utility and water programs. They're going to hire doctors and nurses who know something about public health to run the public health departments. And they're going to hire city planners with college educations for the parks and highway departments. They're not just hiring party men like the political machines were. Even the police officers are going to be coming out of police and fire academies. On the good side, this is more efficient, but on the downside, there's a greater gap between voters and those decision makers. Bureaucrats are not directly elected by the people. And if the new government does not clean house when they're elected, there's more of a divide between voters and a lot of the people making the day-to-day decisions in government. We also see major reform in utilities. Regulation of utilities was very difficult. So what we see is something called gas and water socialism. That's where the city or the people of the city took ownership of gas companies, of electric companies, of water and transportation and other utility companies, so that they wouldn't be run for profit, but they would be financed through tax dollars and just provided to the people of the city. Some notable progressive mayors of the era include Seth Low of New York City and Hazen Pingree of Detroit. Both of these guys fought for fair taxes. They tried to eliminate the corruption that had existed under the political machines. That included making sure government contracts were distributed fairly, and utility reform, make sure people were not paying too much for electricity or gas or water service. We also have Samuel Golden Rule Jones from Toledo and Tom L. Johnson in Cleveland. They did all of that stuff that we talked about. Also, they worked to curb police brutality, build playgrounds in their cities, provide free kindergartens and night schools, and try to improve wages for city workers. When you improve wages for public workers, that has a spillover effect and raises wages for all workers in that city. Tom L. Johnson in Cleveland also worked for prison reform and to educate the public on taxation and utilities. He was a strong believer in knowledge being power. And as a result, Cleveland is really seen as the nation's best governed city for quite a while at the turn of the century. States focused a lot on regulating business. The problems of the late 1800s extended beyond city level or the city limits, and oftentimes cities need help from state government. And in 1902, Maryland takes a major step by passing worker compensation laws. That happens in 1902, but by 1914, over half of the states in the Union had their own worker compensation laws. There's factory inspection laws, and there's mandatory insurance that will follow. In New York, they created state commissions to end the corrupt alliance between business and politics. In New York, there's a real problem with politicians working with the utility companies. So some of the cities in the state of New York socialize their utilities. Others turn to the state regulatory boards to regulate in things like insurance. And they start to outlaw corporate contributions to campaigns and limit lobbying.